Colonel Richter smirked as he demonstrated the classified hand signal to the room full of officers. Only 12 mountain rangers alive know this signal. All men who earned their Edelweiss in blood and ice. His eyes swept the room dismissively, lingering briefly on the unremarkable woman taking notes in the corner. If anyone here recognizes this, you're either reading classified files without authorization, or I'm looking at an elite operative in disguise. The room fell silent until Captain Elena Kaufmann stood, her hands moving through the exact sequence flawlessly, adding a final gesture the colonel had omitted. That's not the complete signal, sir. You've forgotten the altitude indicator for emergency extraction above 4,000 meters. In that moment, 3 years of careful invisibility shattered, and the ghost of the Alps finally returned to claim her justice. Before we dive into this extraordinary story from the Swiss Alps, tell me in the comments, from which corner of the world are you watching today? Are you viewing from the mountains of Colorado, the peaks of Nepal, the valleys of New Zealand, or perhaps somewhere I've never imagined? If you believe that loyalty runs deeper than ice and that some promises are carved in stone, please subscribe to Silent Legends. We honor those who served in silence, who carried secrets that could break nations, and whose courage echoes through the mountain passes of history. This is the story of Captain Elena Kaufmann, and the day the Swiss Military Academy learned that some ghosts refused to stay buried in the snow. The Swiss Military Academy at Thun sat nestled in the shadow of the Bernese Alps, its granite walls weathered by centuries of mountain winds. Within its secure briefing rooms, the next generation of Swiss military officers learned the arts of mountain warfare, alpine survival, and the defense of neutral ground that had remained unconquered for over 500 years. Captain Elena Kaufmann moved through these halls like smoke, present but unremarkable, efficient but forgettable. For 3 years, she had perfected the art of invisibility, serving as an administrative specialist in the Mountain Warfare Division. Her superiors saw competence without brilliance, dedication without passion. Exactly what she intended. At 32, Elena appeared to be a career administrator whose highest aspiration was timely report filing and precise meeting minutes. Her dark blonde hair was always pulled back in regulation style, her uniform impeccably pressed but never drawing attention. Behind wire-rimmed glasses, her gray eyes seemed to hold nothing more dangerous than concern about filing deadlines. But those who looked carefully, and few did, might notice details that didn't quite fit. The way she moved through alpine terrain during base exercises with unconscious efficiency. How her weather assessments, buried in routine reports, showed understanding of mountain conditions that came only from extensive high-altitude experience. Most telling of all, the small scars on her hands that spoke of ice axes and rock faces, of survival at altitudes where mere breathing became an act of will. Colonel Heinrich Richter commanded the Mountain Warfare Division with the authority of someone who had never doubted his own importance. At 58, his career had been built on training others for the mountains he had stopped climbing a decade ago. His office walls displayed photographs of younger, leaner versions of himself on various peaks, but the man who now critiqued others' alpine skills spent his days behind a desk, his fitness maintained in climate-controlled gymnasiums rather than ice fields. Kaufmann, he called one morning as Elena filed the weekly training reports. The inspection team arrives tomorrow. I want the briefing materials perfect. Yes, sir. I'll have everything prepared according to specifications. Richter studied her with the calculating look of a man accustomed to finding fault. 3 years you've been here, Kaufmann. Competent work, never a problem. But tell me, do you ever miss the excitement? Most officers your age crave field assignments. Elena adjusted her glasses, a gesture that had become second nature during her years of practiced invisibility. I find administrative work quite fulfilling, sir. There's satisfaction in ensuring operations run smoothly from the support side. Richter seemed disappointed by her lack of ambition. Well, tomorrow's inspection includes General Morrison from NATO Alpine Command. Make sure you stay in the background. He doesn't like distractions from support personnel. Understood, sir. I'll make myself scarce. As Richter walked away, Elena's gaze drifted to her desk calendar. October 17th was circled in red, not for any official reason, but because some dates burned themselves into memory. 3 years to the day since Operation Steinadler had ended in betrayal and blood on a glacier at 4,200 meters. Her hand moved unconsciously to her throat, where a thin scar ran along her collarbone. The fragment of shrapnel that had caused it remained in a medical waste bin in Innsbruck, along with the official story that Captain Elena Kaufmann and her entire mountain rescue team had died in an avalanche while conducting a routine training exercise. The memories always grew stronger on this anniversary. The sound of automatic weapons fire echoing off ice walls. The radio calls for extraction that met only static. The taste of blood in the thin air as she watched her teammates fall one by one. Most vivid of all, the moment she realized they had been abandoned, not because extraction was impossible, but because their survival had become politically inconvenient. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Elena." Lieutenant Marcus Weber appeared beside her desk, his expression genuinely concerned. Unlike most of the Academy's officers, Weber had always treated administrative staff with basic courtesy, one of the few who bothered to learn their names and occasionally ask about their well-being. "Just reviewing tomorrow's schedules," Elena replied, her voice carrying the perfect note of bureaucratic concern. "Inspection days always make me anxious." Weber nodded sympathetically. "Richter gets wound up for these visits. Did you know General Morrison was with NATO Alpine Command during the Steinadler incident 3 years ago?" Elena's pen stilled against her notepad, but her expression remained neutral. "Steinadler? Tragic training accident. Lost an entire mountain rescue team in an avalanche. Morrison was part of the investigation afterward." Weber shook his head. "6 of our best climbers, including their team leader. Captain someone, Kaufmann, I think her name was." "How unfortunate," Elena managed, her voice steady despite the ice forming in her chest. "The official report blamed weather conditions and equipment failure. But there were always rumors." Weber lowered his voice conspiratorially. "Some said the team was on a classified mission when they died. Something about smuggling routes through the high passes." Elena forced herself to appear only mildly interested in gossip. "Rumors tend to grow around tragedies." "True enough. Anyway, Morrison's inspection tomorrow includes a review of current mountain rescue protocols. Probably wants to ensure we've learned from past mistakes." As Weber walked away, Elena stared at her reflection in the computer screen. Past mistakes. If Weber only knew that the past mistake wasn't weather conditions or equipment failure, it was trusting the very system that now invited its betrayers to conduct inspections. The inspection began at precisely 0800 hours. General Morrison arrived with NATO efficiency, flanked by aides carrying secure tablets and classification folders. Elena watched from her desk as the general moved through the facility with the confident stride of someone accustomed to having doors opened before he knocked. Morrison was younger than she remembered, 52, with the lean build of someone who still maintained high-altitude fitness. His uniform bore the campaign ribbons of multiple Alpine operations, including the distinctive NATO peacekeeping medals from the Balkan interventions where mountain warfare had proved crucial. For 3 years, Elena had prepared for this moment. The confrontation she had planned, revised, and rehearsed in her mind through countless sleepless nights. But seeing Morrison in person, listening to his confident briefings about Alpine security protocols, she felt the familiar rage building like an avalanche gaining momentum. The morning progressed through routine inspections of facilities and equipment. Morrison questioned procedures with the thoroughness of someone who understood that mountain warfare left no room for imprecision. His comments were professional, his standards high but achievable. Elena remained invisible, taking notes in the background while staff officers demonstrated their expertise. She recorded discussions about weather monitoring, equipment standards, and emergency procedures with the detached efficiency that had become her trademark. But when the inspection moved to the classified briefing room for discussions of operational security, Elena felt the weight of 3 years' preparation settling on her shoulders. This was where her patience would either be vindicated or her cover would be blown forever. Colonel Richter called the senior staff to attention as General Morrison prepared to address classified protocols. "Gentlemen," Morrison began, his voice carrying the authority of decades in elite units. Today we'll review some of the more sensitive aspects of Alpine operations, particularly focusing on extraction procedures and emergency communications. He nodded to his aide, who distributed sealed folders to the officers present. These case studies represent both successful operations and tragic failures from our recent history. Understanding the difference between the two is essential for future operational success. Elena maintained her position in the corner, notepad ready, the perfect picture of administrative diligence. But her attention sharpened as Morrison began reviewing classified Alpine operations, including several she recognized from her own service record. The nature of mountain warfare requires absolute trust between team members and their command structure, Morrison continued. When that trust breaks down, when communication fails, the results can be catastrophic. He paused before a wall map showing Alpine regions across Europe. 3 years ago, we experienced one of our most tragic losses. Operation Steinadler, a mountain rescue team conducting classified border surveillance, was lost due to extreme weather and communication failures. Elena's grip on her pen tightened imperceptibly, but her expression remained neutral. The investigation revealed several protocol failures, Morrison explained to the attentive officers. Most importantly, the team leader failed to follow extraction timing protocols. They remained in position beyond their authorized window, and when weather conditions deteriorated, extraction became impossible. The lie was delivered with such casual authority that several officers nodded in understanding. Elena had heard variations of this fabrication for 3 years, but hearing it from Morrison himself, delivered as official truth to officers who would shape future policies, made her vision blur with suppressed fury. However, Morrison continued, moving to a different section of the map, we've learned valuable lessons from that tragedy. Current protocols ensure better weather monitoring and more flexible extraction windows. One of the junior officers raised his hand. General, what about the rumors that Steinadler was more than a training accident? Morrison's expression remained professionally neutral. Lieutenant, classified operations often generate speculation. What matters is the official investigation and the lessons learned. The Steinadler team died due to poor judgment and worse luck. We honor their sacrifice by ensuring their mistakes aren't repeated. As the briefing progressed, Morrison moved into his specialty, the technical aspects of mountain warfare communications and emergency procedures. This was where his extensive experience showed, and where Elena knew her own knowledge would be tested against his fabrications. Communication in Alpine environments presents unique challenges, Morrison explained, warming to his subject. Standard radio protocols must be modified for mountain conditions, and emergency signals require specialized knowledge. He moved to the center of the briefing room, clearly enjoying being the center of attention. For example, this extraction signal sequence was developed specifically for high-altitude operations. Morrison began demonstrating a complex series of hand movements that Elena recognized instantly, not because she had studied it, but because she had used it while watching her teammates die. Only 12 mountain rangers alive know this complete sequence, Morrison declared with obvious satisfaction. All men who've earned their Edelweiss in actual Alpine combat conditions, not training exercises. The room watched with appropriate deference as Morrison continued his demonstration, his movements precise but incomplete. Elena noticed immediately that he was omitting the crucial altitude indicator, the final gesture that specified extraction requirements above 4,000 meters. If anyone here recognizes this, Morrison chuckled, clearly enjoying his moment of superior knowledge, you're either reading classified files without authorization, or I'm looking at an elite operative in disguise. The comment drew polite laughter from the assembled officers. Morrison basked in the attention, the teacher imparting wisdom to eager students. But his eyes swept the room dismissively, briefly noting the administrative specialist in the corner who seemed to be taking detailed notes. Elena felt the moment crystallizing around her like ice forming on a glacier. 3 years of patient planning, of careful invisibility, of building toward this exact confrontation. Morrison stood before her, spreading lies about her dead teammates while claiming exclusive knowledge of signals they had died trying to use. She stood slowly, deliberately, her movement cutting through the room's atmosphere like an ice axe through snow. "That's not the complete signal, sir." Every eye in the room turned to her. Morrison's expression shifted from amusement to confusion to growing concern as Elena removed her glasses and straightened to her full height. The administrative specialist vanished, replaced by something else entirely, a soldier, a survivor, a ghost returning for justice. Her hands moved through Morrison's sequence with absolute precision, then continued with the crucial gestures he had omitted. The altitude indicator for emergency extraction above 4,000 meters. The weather condition modifier for storms above 47. The casualty count indicator that she had used desperately while her teammates bled out in the snow. The signal includes altitude parameters for mountain extraction, she continued, her voice now carrying the authority of someone who had earned knowledge through survival rather than classroom study. Standard protocol for elevations above 4,000 meters where atmospheric pressure affects radio communication and helicopter performance. The room was completely silent. Morrison stared at the woman who moments before had been invisible, his face cycling through recognition, disbelief, and growing alarm. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded, his professional composure cracking. Elena adjusted her posture to perfect military bearing, the transformation complete. "Captain Elena Kaufmann, Swiss Mountain Rangers, team leader of Operation Steinadler, reported killed in action 3 years ago along with my entire unit." She reached into her jacket and placed a blood-stained patch on the briefing table, the distinctive edelweiss of the Mountain Rangers, identical to the one Morrison wore on his dress uniform. "We weren't lost due to weather conditions, General," she continued, her voice coldly precise. "We were abandoned. And I'm the only one who made it back to tell the truth." The silence that followed Elena's revelation was absolute. Colonel Richter's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Junior officers stared in disbelief at the administrative specialist who had just claimed to be a dead war hero. Only Lieutenant Weber seemed unsurprised, a small smile suggesting he had suspected something unusual about the quiet woman who filed reports with uncommon precision. "This is impossible," General Morrison finally sputtered. "Kaufmann died on that glacier. This woman is an imposter, possibly a foreign intelligence operative attempting to discredit NATO Alpine Command." Elena's expression remained coldly professional. 3 years ago, my team was deployed to monitor smuggling routes through the Bernina Pass. Our mission parameters were intelligence gathering only, observe and report. But what we discovered was more than drug trafficking. She produced a secured tablet from her administrative bag, her movements precise and controlled. We found evidence of arms smuggling that implicated several NATO member states in violations of their own weapons embargo policies. When we prepared to transmit this intelligence, we were ordered to delay pending operational security review. Morrison's face had gone pale. "That information remains classified at the highest levels." "Classified to cover up political embarrassment," Elena corrected. "When we requested emergency extraction due to deteriorating weather and enemy contact, you personally denied authorization. Not because extraction was impossible, but because our survival would have required explaining our presence in an area where NATO officially had no operations." She activated the tablet, displaying communication logs that Morrison had thought were permanently buried. "These are the extraction requests we transmitted. Acknowledged but denied. 48 hours later, when avalanche conditions made helicopter approach genuinely impossible, my team was declared lost due to weather." The assembled officers studied the communications with growing comprehension. What had seemed like a training accident was revealed as something far more sinister, the deliberate abandonment of a team whose knowledge had become politically inconvenient. Colonel Richter found his voice first. "Captain Kaufmann, if this is true, how did you survive? And why surface now, 3 years later?" Elena's composure showed its first crack as she answered. "I survived because Staff Sergeant Mueller threw himself on a grenade to shield me from shrapnel. Because Lieutenant Brenner used his own body heat to keep me alive during the first night after he was too wounded to travel. Because Corporal Weber," she glanced at Lieutenant Weber, whose face had gone white with recognition, "gave me his rations and told me to keep running when we both knew he wouldn't make it. She placed 5 identification tags on the briefing table, each bearing a name and the distinctive markings of Swiss mountain rangers. I survived because 5 of Switzerland's finest soldiers decided one of us had to make it back to expose the truth. It took me 14 months to reach an Allied extraction point, another year to create a new identity, and 3 years to work my way back into this command structure. General Morrison's authority was visibly cracking. Whatever personal vendetta you believe you're pursuing, you've just violated numerous security protocols. I'm ordering your immediate detention. On what authority? Lieutenant Weber stood, his voice carrying new respect as he addressed Elena. If she is who she says she is, and that's clearly Captain Kaufmann, I recognize her now from the memorial wall, then we're the ones who betrayed her, not the reverse. The room's dynamics shifted as other officers began recognizing Elena's true identity. The memorial wall in the academy's main hall bore her photograph along with her fallen teammates, but the woman they had been honoring was thinner, grayer, marked by survival in ways that bureaucratic life had not erased. Elena continued her methodical presentation of evidence. The arms trafficking network we discovered was facilitated by defense contractors from NATO member states. When we identified the supply routes and financial transfers, certain officials decided that maintaining plausible deniability was more important than extracting the team that had gathered the intelligence. She produced additional documents showing financial transfers and weapons shipment records. We weren't abandoned because of weather. We were abandoned because acknowledging our presence would have exposed unauthorized operations that violated Switzerland's neutrality agreements. Morrison's face flushed with anger and desperation. You signed confidentiality agreements. This disclosure endangers ongoing operations across multiple theaters. No, General, Elena replied with quiet fury. Abandoning your operatives in hostile territory, that endangers operations. Covering up the deaths of loyal soldiers to protect political careers, that destroys the foundation of military service. She stood straighter, addressing the room rather than Morrison alone. 5 soldiers died on that glacier believing they were serving their country. They died waiting for extraction that would never come, not because it was impossible, but because it was inconvenient. The confrontation might have continued indefinitely, but the briefing room doors opened to admit 2 figures who changed everything, General Patricia Vollenweider, commander of Swiss Armed Forces, and a stern-faced woman in civilian clothes carrying the credentials of Switzerland's Federal Intelligence Service. General Morrison, Commander Vollenweider announced without preamble, you are being detained pending a full investigation into Operation Steinadler and related security breaches. Morrison's protest was immediate, Commander, this woman has violated multiple classification protocols. She's the security risk here. On the contrary, the intelligence officer replied, introducing herself as Director Sarah Kellerhals. Captain Kaufmann has been working with our counterintelligence division for the past 18 months. Her infiltration of this command was authorized at the highest levels of Swiss government. Elena felt a mixture of vindication and exhaustion wash over her. The secret coordination with Swiss intelligence had been the final phase of her plan, ensuring that when the moment came, she would have official backing rather than appearing as a rogue operative seeking personal revenge. The evidence Captain Kaufmann has gathered during her undercover assignment confirms our suspicions about NATO personnel involvement in unauthorized operations within Swiss territory, Director Kellerhals continued. General Morrison, you are being charged with conspiracy, breach of neutrality agreements, and criminal negligence in the deaths of 5 Swiss military personnel. The transformation of the briefing room was complete. Officers who moments before had viewed Elena as an impostor now stood in recognition of her actual rank and service. Morrison, stripped of his authority and facing criminal charges, seemed to shrink before their eyes. Colonel Richter approached Elena with obvious respect and embarrassment. Captain Kaufmann, I owe you an apology. Had I known who you were. You weren't supposed to know, Colonel, Elena replied. The mission required complete invisibility. For 3 years, I needed to be the most forgettable person in Swiss military command while gathering evidence of the conspiracy that killed my team. Lieutenant Weber stepped forward, his expression mixing admiration with sorrow. Captain, I should have recognized you sooner. Your administrative work was too sophisticated for a simple clerk, but I never imagined. You weren't expected to imagine it, Lieutenant. The goal was to remain completely unnoticed until the moment came to reveal the truth. Commander Vollenweider addressed the assembled officers with military formality. What you have witnessed today remains classified pending the completion of our investigation. Captain Kaufmann's survival and her subsequent mission represent one of the most remarkable examples of dedication to duty and pursuit of justice in Swiss military history. She turned to Elena directly. Captain, the Swiss government extends its formal apology for the betrayal you and your team suffered. Your service record will be fully restored, and your team's deaths will be properly acknowledged as line-of-duty casualties rather than training accidents. Elena nodded acceptance, but her response was subdued. Thank you, Commander. But the important thing is that my teammates' families finally learn the truth about how they died. They deserved better than being told their loved ones died due to poor judgment and bad weather. 2 months after Morrison's arrest and the exposure of the NATO conspiracy, Elena stood before a memorial ceremony at the Swiss Military Academy. The 5 names that had been listed under training accidents were now properly honored under line-of-duty deaths. Family members who had spent 3 years believing their loved ones had died due to incompetence now learned they had been killed serving their country with extraordinary heroism. Staff Sergeant Mueller's elderly father approached Elena after the ceremony. My son wrote about you in his final letter, he said quietly. Called you the finest officer he'd ever served under. Said he'd follow you anywhere. He saved my life, Elena replied softly. They all did. Without their sacrifice, none of this would have been possible. The ceremony included the presentation of Switzerland's highest military decorations to the fallen team members, awards that should have been granted 3 years earlier. Elena received the Medal of Military Merit for her survival, investigation, and ultimate exposure of the conspiracy that had killed her teammates. But the moment that mattered most to her came when the Academy's memorial wall was updated with accurate information about Operation Steinadler. No longer described as a training accident, the mission was now properly recognized as a classified intelligence operation that had been betrayed by the very command structure meant to protect its operatives. Commander Vollenweider offered Elena multiple positions within Swiss military intelligence, recognizing that her unique experience and proven dedication made her invaluable for future operations. But Elena's response surprised everyone. With respect, Commander, I'd like to return to mountain rescue operations. Not intelligence gathering or classified missions, but the original mission of the mountain rangers, saving lives in the Alps. After everything you've endured, you want to go back to the mountains? Elena looked through the academy windows toward the peaks where her teammates had died and where she had spent 14 months learning what survival truly meant. The mountains didn't betray us, Commander. People did. The Alps are honest, they'll kill you if you make mistakes, but they don't lie about why. I trust them more than I trust any command structure. 6 months later, Elena was leading mountain rescue training exercises at altitudes above 4,000 meters, teaching the next generation of Swiss Rangers how to survive in conditions where mistakes were fatal and team loyalty was the difference between life and death. During one training exercise, a young lieutenant asked her about the rumors surrounding her survival during Operation Steinadler. Elena's response became legendary within mountain ranger training. The mountain teaches you what matters and what doesn't. Politics, careers, institutional prestige, none of that means anything when you're trying to keep your teammates alive in a blizzard at 4,000 meters. What matters is competence, loyalty, and the promise that no one gets left behind. She gestured toward the peaks surrounding their training area. These mountains are full of ghosts, climbers who made small mistakes, teams that faced bad luck, good people who ran out of time or luck or both. But some ghosts aren't here because of accidents or natural disasters. Some are here because they were betrayed by the very people who should have protected them. The lieutenant waited, sensing more was coming. When I teach you emergency signals and extraction protocols, Elena continued, I'm not just teaching procedures. I'm teaching you how to keep promises. How to ensure that when your teammates trust you with their lives, that trust isn't misplaced. Elena Kaufmann never sought fame for her survival or recognition for her justice mission. She simply carried her teammates' memory through 3 years of patient investigation until the truth could finally be exposed. Her story became a cautionary tale about the consequences of abandoning loyal soldiers and a testament to the power of persistent dedication to truth. Because that's what legends do. They don't abandon their promises when keeping them becomes difficult. They carry the weight of those promises until justice is finally served, no matter how long it takes or how much it costs them personally. Have you ever met someone who kept a promise even when everyone else had forgotten it mattered? Share their story in the comments below. Thank you for watching Silent Legends. If this story moved you, subscribe and help us honor those who serve in silence but whose courage echoes through the mountains of memory. Disclaimer. This video is a fictional narrative created for emotional, inspirational, and entertainment purposes only. The characters, events, and situations portrayed are entirely imaginary and should not be interpreted as factual representations of real-life individuals or events. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or real situations is purely coincidental. This content is not intended to offend, deceive, or cause harm. Viewer discretion is advised.